On this episode of IdiotBox Classic, we're going to be taking a look at one of the most popular shows of all time, The Andy Griffith Show. So today we're going to be going to Mayberry and we're going to be taking a good look at some of the characters there. But we all know them, right? We're all very familiar with Andy, Aunt Bee, Opie. We know the show, so I guess the only thing to do now is to start it in the right way by playing the opening theme that we all know. As we watch Andy and Opie walk down to the fishing hole, I guess it's time to start the theme song to the Andy Griffith Show, which is titled The Happy Fisherman. Roll it! Whoa. That's not The Happy Fisherman. That's not the theme to the Andy Griffith Show. Everybody knows that. That's the Make Room for Daddy theme. The Danny Thomas Show theme. But why? Oh, yeah. That's right. The Andy Griffith Show is a spinoff of Make Room for Daddy. They actually did a backdoor pilot in Season 7, Episode 20. Called Danny Meets Andy Griffith. So I guess that's what we're going to be talking about today, is it's really the first episode of the Andy Griffith Show. So, roll my theme. Salutations and welcome to everybody. Thank you for watching. This is the second episode of the Brilliant Idiot Box. But unlike the first episode of the Brilliant Idiot Box, this is the Brilliant Idiot Box Classic. Today we are looking at the Andy Griffith Show. If I could think of any classic show to start with, I would say the Andy Griffith Show is probably one of the most well-known shows of all time. One of the most watched shows of all time. So I thought it was as good a place as any. It's going to get a short month. There's only going to be 3 episodes. As I'm taking a look at a different show each month, but we'll come back to it. There's plenty episodes of the Andy Griffith Show. Today we are talking about the Andy Griffith Show, sort of the Andy Griffith Show. It's the pilot of the Andy Griffith Show. So I guess we should talk a little bit about the Andy Griffith Show for any of those people who live under rocks and may not be familiar. The Andy Griffith Show centers around the daily life of widower and sheriff Andy Taylor, his cousin / deputy, Barney Fife, his redheaded son, little Opie Taylor, and his sweet Aunt Bee. This is kind of one of the things they kind of did in the old days, is they couldn't have divorced characters, so they would kill off one of the parents, sort of like a Disney movie, really, honestly, if you think about it does nowadays. We have Andy, who's a widower and a single father, trying to raise his son while also dealing with the hijinks. Oh yeah, the hijinks of his fellow citizens of Mayberry. Each week, Andy spreads his common sense, country wisdom in order to help out friends. All the while, no serious crime ever seems to take place in the sleepy little town. So, let's join Andy, waxing philosophic, in the friendly every town of Mayberry. Okay, we'll start out with some facts to astound. So on this episode, even though it's a pilot, when Andy makes his first appearance, the crowd wildly applauds. And although I always thought it was probably canned applause, most things seem to agree that the reason for the loud applause was because Andy was already a popular stand-up comedian, and he'd been seen on television and movies and on stage, and so this explains why he gets such a warm welcome. Another fact to astound is that Rance Howard is in this episode. Rance Howard is the father of Ron Howard, who plays Opie on the Andy Griffith Show. Really, probably the best reason you would never notice him was because he has a non-speaking part of a cameraman. You don't even really get to see him. You don't get to see his face. He doesn't get any lines, so he was very easy to miss. He probably was just standing on set, and they needed somebody, and they said, "Hey, Rance, you act some. Why don't you come be a cameraman?" But I guess there would be worse ways to get a job. Okay, another fact. Here we see Frank Cady, who most people would know better from Petticoat Junction or Green Acres, playing Sam Drucker. Here, Frank Cady plays the town drunk. When the Andy Griffith Show actually starts, we actually have the town drunk Otis, who we're all familiar with. We all know him and love This one, Frank Cady plays the drunk. Frank Cady in a future episode would also play a town drunk, but he was a town drunk in Mount Pilot. It was in Season 5, Episode 18 of The Andy Griffith Show. The title of the episode is The Rehabilitation of Otis. Okay, so when this episode begins, we see Andy escort a car carrying Danny Williams, a.k.a. Danny Thomas, and his family into town. Things start out hot and heavy. The two men are both very snarky and contentious with each other. Danny yells and screams, and Andy never gets to that level, but they do exchange barbs back and forth. So the setup here is Danny has run a stop sign at a crossroads that doesn't exist. I think there's something very meta about that. I mean, I don't know if that was their point or not, but maybe I just overthought it, but I was thinking this. Maybe it was saying that on the road of life, sometimes we stop to take stock of where we are, only to realize there's only one way to go. No? Okay, I tried. Andy points out that they planned on building a crossroad there, but only had the money for the stop sign so far, and they're still waiting, and someday there will be a crossroads. And then Danny gets out of his car, he's angry, and you know he's going to yell. He always yells. He's pretty much famous for it. So we kind of get the idea of how this is going to go. Danny's a big city slicker who talks down to the hayseed Andy and thinks he's better than the hillbillies in Mayberry, and Andy in particular. I guess I could point out that this is kind of a common stereotype that we see and run through a lot of different TV shows, of the city slicker that thinks he's better than the simple folk, and in the end always finds out that he doesn't know as much as he thought he did. But truthfully, this works out here because this isn't out of character for Danny. He kind of thinks he's better than most. So here we see something that will only be in the pilot. It will be dropped later on. We see that Andy wears many hats in this town. Danny demands to see the justice of the peace to argue his fine, and Andy obliges him very easily, a lot easier than Danny would have thought. But that's when we see Andy picks up his sheriff plaque from his desk and replaces it with a justice of the peace plaque.
I'm to say to the justice of the peace. Now, where is he? Let's get going here.
Well, now, just easy. Don't get excited. He'll be along in just a tiny old second. Now, court's in order. What's your complaint?
Danny is furious. He is beside himself. How bad can a town be when the same guy who arrests you is the same guy that decides if you're guilty or not? So Danny tries to argue his case to Andy, the justice of peace, and Andy tells him who's better to know whether or not he's guilty than the person who arrested him. I somehow think that seems fitting nowadays, but maybe that's just me. So then we see Danny, his wife, and Andy, they're discussing the crime. And then they get suddenly interrupted by a visitor to the jail. A man stumbles in, and we see Proto-Otis, Will Hoople. He is a town drunk, and he's letting himself in his cell and locking himself up. So when Danny and his wife say, "What's going on? What's he doing?" Andy lets them know that this guy's a town drunk, and Andy has deputized him so he can arrest himself for intoxication. It makes Andy's life a lot less complicated, not having to arrest Will all the time. As I mentioned earlier, we see that Will is played by Frank Cady, who will go on playing Sam Trucker, general store owner in Hooterville, on the shows Petticoat Junction, Green Acres, and a few times on the Beverly Hillbillies. So the drunken Will lets himself into a cell as the stunned out-of-towners look on in disbelief. So Danny's arguing with Andy about the fine, in which Andy tells him, "Oh, the fine's $5. Danny's like, $5? That's all? That's nothing." He pulls out a huge wad of bills and says, "Hey, just go ahead and take 10 or 15. This kind of seems to, grate on Andy, and he gets an idea and tells him that the fine is $100. Well, of course, Danny doesn't think that's fair because it was supposed to be $5 for everybody, right? But nope, it's $100 for Danny. Since it's clear that the lower amount meant nothing to Danny, Andy decides that in order to actually punish him, he must give him a bigger fine. So Andy raises the fine. So I don't know, at this point I think there's an argument to be made whether or not it's really fair that Danny has to pay more because he's wealthier and more well off than other people. Is it fair? But then again, is it punishment if it doesn't bother him, if he's got that much money? So maybe the larger amount is fair. Well, of course, this makes Danny very angry, and he threatens to expose Andy and his corruption when he gets back to the city. But Danny can't wait till he gets back to the city. So he decides to call the local paper. He's going to expose Andy. He's going to show the town what kind of man their sheriff is. As soon as the operator dials up, the editor of the newspaper, another phone near Andy's desk rings, and Andy answers it, editor of the town's newspaper. Well, this makes Danny upset. I think we kind of see that the Andy being all these different really important people kind of makes the town look dumb and kind of overburdens the character of Andy Taylor. So I think it was a good thing that they dropped a lot of that before they started the actual show itself. So Danny, who has a huge interview on national television, calls to cancel the interview, only to have the interviewer agree to send a cameraman and do the interview from the Mayberry jail. Well, Danny is very happy because now it gives him a backdrop in which to expose Andy and his corrupt ways. Then we see another part of Andy that we haven't got to see in this episode yet. We see that Andy's distraught son, Opie, running to the sheriff's office looking for his paw. It turns out Opie's pet turtle was killed when a lady stepped on it. Now, as a redhead, there has to be some doubt that maybe Opie did something to the turtle himself, but I guess we never find that out. But nonetheless, this whole situation leads to some surprisingly dark jokes involving death. I mean, it includes a cute little redheaded Opie calling for the execution of the lady that killed his turtle. I guess maybe at the time it wasn't thought, but this is kind of nowadays would be considered a little bit dark for this kind of folksy, old-type, small-town show. But we're talking about death in the show, and when you see that Andy's wife has passed away, it only can remind me that in the first seasons of Make Room for Daddy, Danny's wife was played by Jean Hagen. She left the show, and because it was upsetting in those days if she and Danny had gotten divorced, because, like I said, you couldn't have divorced characters, they went with a more acceptable, kinder choice. And they killed off the character. But at least her death was off-screen. She wasn't stepped on by anybody. I guess that's a good thing. So maybe that's why Andy's wife was pre-dead. That way they didn't have to worry about the actress leaving and save themselves some trouble of having to kill off the character in front of everyone. So we get to see Andy being a loving father to his son, and so does Danny. And this softens and changes his mind until Andy accuses Danny of trying to use Opie to blackmail him, and Danny goes in for one of his classic yelling fits. Danny walks back into the cell and shuts the door. He's not going to take it. He's not going to take it anymore. Now, this is when we see the town widow, Henrietta Perkins. I don't know, she looks suspiciously like Aunt Bee. Frances Bavier, who played Henrietta Perkins, once the Andy Griffith Show starts, she would go on to be the Aunt Bee that we all know and love. But from some of the stories that I've heard of Andy having a problem working with Bavier, he may have wished to have left her as the widow and really never focus on her on the show. That would have saved him a lot of trouble. So, Henrietta goes on to tell the sad story of her husband's failures and how little they had when he died. She wanted a nice suit for his funeral and she rented one, but she accidentally buried him in it. So now the crooked Mr. Johnson is charging her daily rental fee for the suit, which keeps her, and paying him is keeping her poor and desperate. She's about to lose her home. So in something we would kind of see played out again later on in the actual Andy Griffith Show, Andy has to try to find a way to help her keep her home. Kind of fitting, I guess. In this episode, Mr. Johnson is played by Will Wright. Will would then reoccur on the Andy Griffith Show as a crooked business owner, Ben Weaver, who does this sort of same thing again, and Andy once again has to try to stop him from foreclosing and taking somebody's home away. So Andy calls in Mr. Johnson and explains to Mr. Johnson that Mrs. Perkins has more than paid for the suit and convinces him to let her out of their agreement and to even give her a refund because she's paid well more than the suit was worth. So Danny sees this and he doesn't act on it. It doesn't make him stop, but you know, he does see that Andy is trying to do some good, but still he feels like he's been ripped off by Andy. So now we get to the TV interview. So in the interview, Danny says he's languishing in the cold, dirty cell. And Andy points out that his Aunt Lucy cleans it every day. Of course, that raises another question. Whatever happened to Aunt Lucy? I mean, she's never mentioned again. Did something bad happen? I suspect, once again, it was probably something to do with Opie. So then after Danny tears Andy apart on the interview, Andy feels like it's his duty to go on TV and explain why he fined Danny more than he did most people. And he explains that because it wouldn't have meant anything to Danny, there would have been no real punishment. The punishment would not have fit the crime. So Andy explained that $100 to Danny was the equivalent of $5 to most people in Mayberry. And that's why he did it. It was not because he was trying to be unfair, trying to con Danny out of his money. Eventually, after Andy explains this, Danny starts to feel bad. And he agrees to pay the fine. All's happy. It's same story on most sitcoms. 30 minutes, everything's happy, everybody's good. But then Danny is about to leave the jail. I mean, he and Andy have had new understanding and new appreciation of each other. But as he's about to leave, Andy reminds him that he only spent 3 days in jail, and since it was $100 or 10 days in jail, that Danny still owes $70. Well, Danny, being the penny-pinching tightwad that he is, he gets mad and he goes back in the cell and locks himself in, and we get end credits. So I love the Andy Griffith Show. I did watch some of Make Room for Daddy and some of Danny Thomas on Nick at Night, and so it was kind of fun to get to see one of these episodes. 'Cause I do remember watching this episode back then. I think it was pretty neat. I mean, it's the old classic thing of city guy goes into town and just thinks everybody's beneath him, and they're not smart. That they're all yokels, and he learns a lesson about how wise they are and how small town life tends to be slower, better. And of course, that's a recurring theme on the Andy Griffith Show itself, and it's a recurring theme on a lot of shows. But you have to remember, this is an older show. This was not something that had been done to death back then, like it has now. I did love the episode, and it was a good starting point for Andy Griffith Show. And it's fun to see how they polish and shine the ideas until they got what they wanted. How Andy doesn't do every important job in the town. How they thought they scaled that back. How Andy became less of a comedian and more of a straight man, and just kind of the differences and how they move some of the characters around, and it's how we ended up with the Andy Griffith Show. And it was neat to see how it got from there to here. So I really enjoyed this, and I had fun watching it after so long, probably 30 years maybe. So I guess that brings us to the end, because I guess no more else to say. Please, comment on this. Tell me what you think about this episode. Tell me what you think about the episode of Make Room for Daddy. If you can find it, watch it. Please do. It's fun. I want to thank everybody for watching my video, and I'll see you guys later. The next episode I'll be reviewing next week will be the actual first episode of the Andy Griffith Show. So please come back and join us for that. Thank you for watching, and I will see you later. I'd like to say a big thanks to everyone for watching my video. Please feel free to leave a comment on what you'd like to see more of, or changes you'd like to see made. If you liked the video, please go to my Patreon page and support me so that I can continue to make videos. And if you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe down at the bottom of the page, and click the little bell to notify you when I post new videos. Thank you very much.